With the teasers for Chapter 29 most likely starting tomorrow, I figured it'd be a good idea to make one final video with all of my theories before the teasers. After thinking on my own as well as listening to other people's opinions on this topic, I think I have a pretty good idea for 4 main picks for Chapter 29, along with a few other things I'd like to mention. And since my last video on Chapter 29, a detail was brought to my attention that completely eliminates a license as a possibility for this chapter. Stick around if you want to hear more about that. To kick things off, I'd like to mention ahead of time all of the licenses I want to talk about today. FNAF, It, Friday the 13th, Candyman, Stranger Things, and Alien/Predator. First, I would like to briefly tackle Candyman. Though he qualifies as a big license and in my opinion would be a good fit for the game, I firmly believe Candyman has little to no chance for Chapter 29. This is because this chapter is confirmed to come with at least one survivor along with a map. A full chapter in other words. But Candyman doesn't have any great picks for survivors at all, and overall seems much more suited to be a paragraph. I would also like to briefly bring up Slenderman as, similarly, I believe he would be good in Dead by Daylight but has no good picks for a survivor. There is definitely some possibility for him or Slenderman to be Chapter 30, but that's a discussion for another day. Before I move on though, I would like to bring up something I covered before, quite a long time ago. The possibility of an original survivor with a licensed killer in the same chapter. This would allow licenses like Slenderman or Candyman to appear in a full chapter as well as Springtrap, though that's a discussion for later. Back on track, this isn't just something I bring up randomly. For the Leatherface chapter, which turned out to be a paragraph, Kate Denson was originally meant to be a survivor for that chapter, meaning it is something Behavior has at least thought about and may do again. Again though, this ended up not being the case as Kate Denson later came in with the clown and curtain call. I also think that as a result of this, along with it being years since then and nothing like this happening again, this might be an idea Behavior has completely tossed to the side. Still though, something to keep in mind. Even with that said, I'd say the probability of Candyman or Slenderman being Chapter 29 is pretty low, though not obsolete. Second, we have Friday the 13th. This will be very brief as I have covered pretty much everything last video, but just to cover all bases, the lawsuit has been over for a very long time now and we know Behavior wants Jason in the game. The only problem would be if his license holders didn't want to make that deal. For that, I would like to bring up how the license for the asymmetrical Friday the 13th game is soon to be terminated, as well as another Friday the 13th game in the works confirmed to be not asymmetrical. In other words, there is an opening for Jason in an asymmetrical game, and if anything will, I believe Dead by Daylight could very easily fill that void. All in all, very likely for Chapter 29. For FNAF, I would like to preface with my belief it is actually very likely for Chapter 30, and thus lessens its probability this time around, but I still wouldn't call it unlikely. First is the point mentioned in my last video, the anniversary lineup. The most likely date for this chapter's reveal and PTB is August 8th or 9th, and the anniversary of FNAF is none other than one of these dates. August 8th. Next is the fact that the Security Breach DLC, Ruin, was released just a few days ago, so FNAF is very relevant at the moment. An argument against it, which I honestly agree with, is that there's no great pick for a survivor. But thanks to another comment, another good point was brought to my attention. Yoichi Asakawa. He was in the Ringu movies, but he was just a kid. Behavior aged him up quite significantly for the game and created a previously unseen version of the character, and they could do something like this for FNAF. Many people say Michael Afton should be the survivor, but my only problem with that is that we've never really gotten a good look at him, and Dead by Daylight would be the first time we get that. But with Yoichi's aging up being something we've seen before, it is likely we could see another licensed survivor in a light in which they have never previously been seen. My only counter argument for this, though, is I'm personally not too sure Scott Cawthon would want the first time we get a good look at him, such an important character, to be in a collaboration. But I could be wrong about that. Looking back at all of this together, I'd say FNAF actually has an okay chance for this chapter, but I would still argue it has a much greater possibility for Chapter 30, and that alone decreases its chances here significantly. Next, let's talk about It, aka Pennywise. I don't have much to say about him, as Schmuggles made a very detailed and in-depth video for why he could actually be very possible for Chapter 29. To briefly summarize, near the end of 2022, Warner Brothers lost the rights to the character Pennywise, along with the It franchise in general, as Stephen King reclaimed the rights for himself. The time before this happens is sometimes referred to as the use it or lose it window. In other words, this was Warner Brothers' last chance to use the license before they would lose the rights forever. Say, for example, a Dead by Daylight chapter. But you might be wondering, if they already lost the rights almost a year ago, how could he come into the game now, licensed from Warner Brothers? Well, Dead by Daylight licensed chapters have been confirmed by Behavior to be in development for about a year, and Chapter 29 will be a little under a year since Warner Brothers lost the rights to Pennywise. As such, it is very possible, and I would even argue likely, that they made a contract with Behavior before this happened to make as much money as possible with the license. Assuming Chapter 29 is Pennywise, even though it releases almost a year after they lost the rights, if a contract was signed right before that period, it is completely legal and possible. Again, all credit to Schmuckles for the points brought up here, and I would highly recommend you check out his video on Pennywise if you want a more in-depth dive on this topic. The link to that will be at the top of the description. All in all, he actually seems fairly likely in my mind, especially since Matthew Cote has outright confirmed he wants Pennywise. In fact, in an interview a few years ago, he admitted he attempted to reach out to Stephen King to make this a possibility, and he declined. So not only do we know this is something Behavior wants, but the time frame lines up nearly perfectly for it to be in Warner Brothers' desire as well. And second to last, let's talk about Stranger Things. Last video, I was actually very confident in its possibility for Chapter 29. However, there is something I'm honestly very shocked I forgot about and only remembered thanks to a comment on my last video about this. A little over 2 months ago now, Matthew Cote appeared on a podcast called Slasher Radio. On it, he basically confirmed Stranger Things leaving DVD was not Behavior's idea, and furthermore, as of that time, he had tried to reach out to Netflix to no avail. In short, it is much too soon after that for them to have made a chapter, unless he was outright lying. So, unfortunately, Stranger Things has little to no chance of being Chapter 29. I do hope it comes to be eventually, though. Last but not least, let's talk about Alien and Predator. For those confused, I'm bundling these two together as they're both Disney licenses. And since they're both highly desired for the game, if we get one, it's highly likely we'll get the other at one point or another. There's no real exact evidence for why they could be Chapter 29, but simultaneously there's not much to say it won't be. As for which one they do for this chapter, I'm pretty confident in saying we get an Alien chapter before Predator. So they're not exactly unlikely, but there are certainly better picks. To end us off, I'll go ahead and make a top 5 list as to what I think is most likely for this upcoming chapter. For number 5, we'll have a miscellaneous license. This is just any license I didn't have time to cover today. In number 4, I'll be putting Springtrap, as he definitely has a chance, but I just think he's way more likely for Chapter 30. Number 3 is tied for Alien and Predator, nothing really going against it, but not too much for it. Number 2 is Jason Voorhees, for the aforementioned points of being a license we know Behavior wants, and an opening for an asymmetrical game. And most likely, at the number 1 spot, is Pennywise. I was honestly surprised by this, as I went into this video with the intention of Jason being in first place, but honestly, Pennywise just seems way too likely. Like Jason, we know Behavior wants him in the game, but unlike him, we have evidence supporting Pennywise being likely for this exact time frame. And as mentioned in my last video, he would definitely work for a full chapter. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe as it helps me out more than you might think. If you disagree with something or you just like to add to a point I made, feel free to leave a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.